Hello everyone, and welcome to this video tutorial on tileable textures and how to use a technique called render to texture to add detail after the fact. So for this lecture you are going to need 3D Studio Max, obviously, and also having Photoshop on the ready will help you with this particular lecture. Now, what I want to do at this point is I want to discuss a little bit of what we did last time. Last time we talked about surfaces like what we have for this little sphere. But what I do want to talk about now is what if you have a surface, say for example a texture that would be perfect for one area, but it's a little bit too small. Say for example, let's see if we can bring that up. There we are. Fourth time's the charm, it would seem. So in this case, I already have several materials and textures ready. So I have a texture for the following elements. One specifically for the floor, one specifically for the walls, and one specifically for the ceiling. But let's actually start over again just so that we can all be on the same page, so to speak. And we'll start fresh. Yeah, there we go. Excellent. So I'm going to put this on my 3D environment, so to speak. Now to get the process started, from what you guys remember before, is we're going to need to go into the diffuse color and add either a bitmap over here or select this little gray box and select bitmap in that way. Now, in this case, I just want to show what the floor would look like. So if I wanted the floor to be repeated, I could basically double click the wood fine, because this is basically my choice for the floor. And once again, if I want to see the preview of that, I could choose the little checkerboard with the light bulb in front of it and place it like so. So we should be seeing something, at least at this point. And I'm just going to convert this to editable poly. Just a heads up, I did unwrap this before this assignment, and a topic we'll be going over at another time. But yes, convert to editable poly, just so we're not dealing with that at this time. And yeah, there we are. So as you can see, well, it looks pretty good, but I feel that this could look a little bit better because most of the time the wood grains, particularly on the floor, are going to be a little bit thinner. So to basically make those thinner without having to paint those, obviously, and if you have a what's called tileable or repeatable or seamless texture, what you would do is you'd go into the bitmap section, and there's a little option here called tiling. Now we can change this to a higher number. So let's say, for example, we'll take this size and multiply it by 4. So if I put in 4 and 4 for the U and V coordinates, there we are. It basically repeats this repeatable texture over and over and over again. Now if you guys want to find a place that has good tileable textures, a good place to go would be textures.com. So if you type in textures.com, it's a free account, by the way. Totally would recommend it. You can find a huge library of different textures you can use. So in the case of the floor, I put in floor in the little search over here, and it'll give you a lot of different options. Now the way that you know if it's something that could be repeated is you should see a little option here called seamless. If you see seamless over there, then this can be repeated over and over and over again. Now what we're seeing here pretty much looks like almost all these are seamlesses. Although if it isn't, it will not have that little icon. But it usually looks like they try and give you those seamless textures. Anyway, so I have my seamless texture for the floor. And wouldn't be a bad idea to rename this material floor if possible. Excellent. Now I'm also going to make a material for the walls. Oops. Kind of jumped the gun a little bit there, but that's okay. If you ever need to get rid of a bitmap or any of these other maps, you can select it and delete, and it's pretty easy to get rid of. So go into standard, bringing this over, go into bitmap, putting this in diffuse color. And as I said before, for the walls, this is a concrete stucco surface. And I'm just going to see how this looks. So I'm going to put this 4 by 4. I'm going to put this my 3D scene. It almost ends up looking a little too subtle, which is not a good thing. So I can go back here. Let's put this 1 by 1 just to see what this would look like. Ooh, yeah, definitely need a tile for that. Better. I believe that may be 10 by 10. And this is one of the reasons why you should always render, because what you see in the preview might not always be what you get. So rendering that out will definitely give you a better feel for that. So close. I think the tiling on 12 by 12 can do that. And again, where I'm getting this is I'm double clicking the bitmap, and that's giving my tiling text option, and I can change those at will. Perfect. I'm going to do the same thing. I just wanted to see that real quick. For the ceiling, making myself a new material. Again, these are all standard materials that I'm using, by the way. The other materials do have some very unique features, but a little rule to learn early on. The prettier something looks, usually, the longer it's going to take to render. So it is something to kind of keep in mind. Oop, almost forgot. I need to name this walls over here. And this is going to be ceiling. Okay, so I'm clicking the little dark box. I'm hitting bitmap and choosing plaster ceiling. And in this case, again, always good to double check. So this is what it would look like, the ceiling. So yeah, I think I need a little bit more of a tile for this. So I'm going to put this 4 by 4, and okay, that looks pretty good. So definitely easy enough to put on these materials. Not very difficult compared to what you had before, but I'm sure you guys have already seen the problem. For this material, I can only put on one at a time. Not to mention, if it's something that's repeating, I can't really change it easily, so that is a bit of a problem. Now, a person could use a different type of material, I'll bring that up, called the multi-sub-object option to basically separate them, but if I wanted to put in other details, like for example, if I wanted to spray paint the walls a color, can't really do that because of how the tiling's set up. But what I can do is I can make this into a JPEG using the Tilable texture option and make some adjustments and changes as I go. So let's do that then. So to get started with the whole making this into a picture, I need to use an option called Render to Texture. Now, once again, before we do this, I want to remind y'all that before I started this lecture, I did use a technique called Unwrap UVW to spread out the UVs and basically make it so that I can paint on them. That part's kind of important for what we're going to be doing next. Okay, so let's actually start with the floor. I feel that this might be able to be our best bet to get started. Okay, now how the render to texture works is you go to the little option at the top called rendering. And then you go down your list until you see an option called render to texture. You can also get here by hitting the 0 key, and it'll get you there quickly. Many cases, a lot of people hit this by accident. And what we're going to do first is we need to basically tell 3ds Max where we want the picture file to go to. So that'll be in general settings usually. And good news for us, because we set up our files ahead of time, it should go into the scene assets images by default, and it is. But nevertheless, it's always good to double check. And you can also check over here by looking at the little directory that's in this area. But at this point, we're good. Now, step 2, the objects to bake. Obviously, we need to select our box, which is, in this case, box 1. This is the object that we want to texture bake this information. And what we're going to be doing here next is we need to basically tell the render to texture option that we've already done our unwrapping and we don't need it to do it for us. That can be found in the mapping coordinates. And if I choose use existing channel, this knows that the unwrap is already done, so it doesn't need to do that. So just a little reminder, objects to bake. You have the object that's over here, always a good thing to double check. And in this case, we don't really need projection mapping, that'll be for another lesson. And mapping coordinates, we're using existing channel. That's basically the unwrap part of it. Now, step 3, just going to go down our list, is the output. So basically it's going to be asking, how do you want to export this out? So if I select add, you can use options like complete map, specular map, diffuse map, etc. In this case, let's keep it easy. Use the diffuse map, because that's basically your color, and choose add elements. Now once that's done, it's going to ask a bunch of options on what kind of map, what kind of name do you want this to be, the file name and type. In this case, let's actually change this a little bit. We're just going to change this quickly to JPEG, and make sure it's saved in the appropriate area. So in this case, for some reason, it looks like it got a little bit lost, but I'm fixing that right now. And 3ds Max Demo, Scene Assets, Images. So it's always good to double check, which is what I'm doing right now. And I'm going to call this, the thing that I'm changing, I'm going to call this wood_bake, so that I know that this is supposed to be the baked texture version of the wood. And I'm going to put this at best quality and hit OK. So that's all set. Now the target map slot, that one's easy. We need to make sure this is diffuse color. Yeah, there we are. And the size, I'd recommend, at least for now, making it the highest quality that's put in the default settings. So in this case, that'd be 2048 by 2048. The bigger the picture is, the potentially better quality you'll be able to get. But you also have to remember that the bigger the size, the more resources it's going to take to make things work. So always use this with caution. Again, in this case, 2048 by 2048 will be good for most of your purposes. Now last, but certainly not least, at least for now, I'd recommend going into Bake Material. This is going to go into what's an option called Save Source Create Shell, which basically will have a preview of the newer version while keeping some of the settings for the old. In this case, I would import this into Source. Usually find that that works a little bit easier for our purposes in this case. So in other words, it's basically going to take the material that we have before, if it comes up, yep, there we go, and replace this Tilable texture with the new one that we're going to be creating. So I'm just going to put this over here for now, and yep, going down my list. We don't need to do anything in automatic mapping because we already unwrapped it, so nothing to change there. So I am going to go through the whole checklist one more time, because I have to do this 2 more times for these 2 other areas. So I'm going to go to Render once I'm ready. And as you can see, it does a small little preview over here on what the actual texture is going to look like. And ooh, that is looking quite nice. And if I go into my little setting over here, I can actually take a look at what my new map is going to look like by double-clicking the new bitmap that's over here, bitmap parameters, view image, and that's the actual version that has been texture baked. Nice and simple. Okay, so I did that for the floor. Now I also need to do this for 2 other elements. Now it seems a little bit weird, but it will make sense as we progress. So once again, if you need to see the whole process again, I'm going to show it a second and third time. So, for the walls, yep, here we go. I did mention how important it is to label all your stuff, right? Okay, so I'm going to click and drag this to the walls. So this is a version that has not been properly texture baked. That is soon going to change. So once again, I'm going to go to Rendering. I'm going to go to Render to Texture. I'm going to make sure in the general settings that this is going to be rendered someplace I can find easily. And if I can't, that I change that as soon as possible. So in this case, it does seem like it didn't go to the 3ds Max demo, so I'm changing that now. That's basically the folder I made previously, but I am going to make that images. That's the folder I'm currently working in. So, okay, so I'm going to minimize that. Objects to bake is still going to be box. And good news, in the map scene coordinates, I'm using the existing channel, and that's still going to be the same. Going to go down my list a little bit more, making sure that the name is diffuse map, the file type and type. Just going to click over here. And right now, it's trying to oversave after the last one I did, so I'm going to call this walls_bake. Keep it as a JPEG. Though by default it is usually going to be Targa. Now, again, I did say change the size to 2048 by 2048. Good news about when you're doing this stuff. Oh, one more thing. Hit the drop down, make sure it's diffuse color. That part's very important. And I still have my settings for the add diffuse map. So, yep, there I am. Now, as I was about to say, any settings that you make for the first time, it usually keeps those until you turn the software off. So once you do it once, if you need to do it for multiple objects or use multiple maps for the same area, it does save you a little bit of time, which is nice. Baked material, you want to put this into source, first option up here, and render that bad boy out. And again, now I did my walls, which is basically going to be over here. So when I'm getting ready to do my texturing, that's the area that I need to keep in mind. So, okay. Probably shouldn't have closed that. Sorry about that. So yeah, here it is. So my original, in case something went wrong, and the new version, which again I'm going to take a very quick look. Tiled and perfect. Now the last part is going to be the ceiling. Really should stop turning off that material. There we go. And I'm just going to click and drag this to my box. Okay, and again, it's already been set up, ready to go. And I'm going to once again do a texture bake for this. Now for those of you guys who need to see the whole process, I will show the whole process one more time. So I'm going to go to rendering, render to texture. Make sure you go to general settings and make sure that this is going to be placed someplace that's going to be useful. In this case, as I said before, I made a folder on the desktop called 3ds Max Demo, and I'm making sure that's going to scene assets and images because that's where I'm saving currently any textures that I currently have. So hitting OK. That was already set up, but still it's good to know. So objects to bake, still having my box selected. And for mapping coordinates, again, this has already been unwrapped, so I don't really need to do anything. I'm using existing channel. So that's the only two things you need to check here. For the output, I'm going to actually start this completely over again so that you can see the whole process. I'm once again using Add. I'm choosing Diffuse Map, hitting Add Elements, and going down my list, and yep, where it says File Name and Type, clicking here, and I'm going to call this ceiling_bake. Now again, you can keep it as a Targa, you can change it to JPEG, whatever file format you find is going to be more useful for you. And a little heads up for the future, depending on what format you're going for or style you're going for, if you're, like for example, going to be going into games, JPEG might not be the best one to go into. In some cases, PSDs might be better to go into. It all depends on the needs of the picture. But in this case, I'm trying to keep things quick, so that's why I'm keeping it JPEG. And I'm hitting save. Again, make sure it's best quality, which it is, and make sure that the slot is diffuse color. Very good. The size, I want to make sure it's 2048 by 2048, which it currently is. And the baked material, again, by default, it's save source, but you want to put it into output into source, just so that we can get right to the changing, which I'm going to be doing momentarily. And then you hit render. And there we go. So again, what you're seeing here, this is only a preview. This is basically what the preview looks like with the lighting. But if I was to go into the material itself, once again, double click the actual texture, which again is the visual information. View image, you'll see that the shadow and any light information is gone. That's a good thing. So that's pretty much where I want to be, at least with the texture baking. But here's the problem. We have one material specifically for the ceiling, one for the walls, one for the floor. How can we combine them all together? Now, again, you can use a material called multi-sub object, but in this case I actually want to use option with my actual texturing in Photoshop. So let's actually go here, and I am going to open up all three of those textures. Okay, so you can make yourself a new material or not. Leave that up to you. Personally, I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to make myself a new material. So I'm going to either go to File, New, and input the stuff manually, or alternatively, since I know this is the size I want, I'm going to hit Control A. I believe in Mac that would be Command A, and Command C, or Control C. That basically will copy the information. And I'm going to go to New, and hey, take a look at that. All the information I needed previously already put in here. Bam. Okay, so what I would do next is I basically would take the information or not the information, I would basically take each of these textures and paste it into the super texture, so to speak. So let's actually go with the ceiling, because that hopefully should be the more difficult one. I like to get the more difficult stuff done early. I'm going to hit Command A, or Control A if you're on a PC. Control C to copy. And in here, I'm going to hit Control V as in victory, or you can go to Edit and Paste. So before, I designated this area to be the ceiling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the little selection option over here and delete what I don't need. And bam. So now this is all set and ready to go for the ceiling. And I'm going to do the same thing for the walls. Control A, Control C, and Control V as in victory. And once again, just get rid of any elements I don't need. Boom. And finally, the floor, which hopefully should be the easiest. Control A, Control C, Control V as in victory, and once again get rid of the elements I don't need. Again, this little icon at the bottom, that was originally meant to be the floor, which is why I designated the way that I did. So I just get rid of everything else. And voila. So now I took three different surfaces that had nothing to do with each other, and I basically combined them all together so that they could coexist. So I'm going to go to File, Save As, and I'll just keep it as a Photoshop file this time. I'm going to name this, well, we'll call it Room Diffuse. Again, so I know what the designation is going to be, and hit Save. And now, this time when I go into 3ds Max and make myself a new material, choose the bitmap option, and in this case, again, I kept it as a PSD file. It's going to ask if I want to use individual layers or everything collapsed together. In this case, it's going to be collapsed. And I'm just going to click and drag that here. And use the Show Shaded Material. And there we go. So now, all those elements are nice and neatly put together. So next time I hit Render, even though the elements don't look quite as good as you might expect in the preview, remember what you see here is not always going to be what you get. What you see here, that's closer to what you're going to be getting. So now the final reason why a person would want to even use this in the first place is now you can go to town with basically changing elements in Photoshop. So I'm not going to spend too much time with this just because of the time restraints, but I will. Yep. Sorry about this. Yeah, I suppose I can basically just, let's see. I'm having difficulty adding a different layer, so I do apologize about that. Oh, there we go. Just minimizing that. And yeah, there we are. So now I can just go to town with adding details and all that other fun stuff. So say for whatever reason, I want to add a black line to those walls. Why? I just feel like it. Now that I have this different layer, I can do that. And again, I'm basically making this stuff with the assumption that you know a little bit of the basics on Photoshop. And for the ceiling, let's see what we can do with that. Let's actually use the burn tool to just make some of these areas a little bit darker. So yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we will be here all day if I basically do that. But now I'm able to add a little bit of variation and change where this was not possible before. And for the floor, let's see what we can do for that. Okay. So I'm just adding this minor thing. Again, layers are your friend. Although I really should be labeling all these, but for another time. And I'm going to save what I have. Nice thing about using Photoshop is anything that you change here will automatically be changed in your 3D environment. And that's basically everything there is to do with Tilable textures, and going to the next step and using render to texture bake all that visual information so you can make the adjustments and changes afterwards. Again, this is John Steffen. I hope that you enjoyed this little tutorial, and hope to see you guys again, provided I one day figure out how to stop this. All right. There we go. Do I want to